For it. Hey, this is week 8. You guys have persevered, and we appreciate that. And I hope that this class and this experience has been worthwhile for you. And at the very least, you can say that you've taken Wesleyan Theology and it meets the requirement, and you're done, right? But hopefully it was more than that for you. I have thoroughly enjoyed the threaded discussions, and I know Glenn has read several of them throughout the 8 weeks. Every once in a while I'll say, hey Glenn, you got to read this one. This is something that has been very stimulating, and it has been for me as well as for others, I think, based on the response to each other. So I want to thank you. It's been a very enriching experience for me as well. And I've also learned some things that we need to try and do differently for those people who will be following in your wake that may want to take this, and hopefully we'll be able to make some improvements based off of your suggestions. So don't hesitate to do that for us. I think there's going to be an evaluation form of some sort that comes out, so please help us and hold us accountable so that we can do this better next time. All right? So this is week 8. We're going to finish Wine Coop, and we're going to be reading a fairly significant portion of Snyder, finishing. We haven't read all of him, but we've come close. And there are a number of issues that are going to be raised. One of them, I think, that comes from Wine Coop's statement on page 126, which is her conclusion, dealing with the difference between sort of being preventative in our approach to our theological practices and pragmatic ministry, if you will, on the one hand, versus being very positive and moving out and moving on. And it's sort of the difference between, at least in my mind, and I just had this conversation with a traditional student, you know, if you think about trying to lose weight, and you think about it, then it becomes the thing that you think about, and then you eat, and you overeat. But if we don't think about it, we just move positively from one step to the next, without, you know, putting a list up and saying, I'm not going to eat these things, but rather, what are the things we're going to do, and moving forward. I think that's kind of what she's getting at, but I'll look forward to your conversation about that. The other piece is Snyder's comment about continually subject history to the norm of the biblical revelation. And I asked the question, do you agree or disagree? And I think this is more pertinent than I realized, given the fact that we're wrestling with some cultural issues right now. The same-gender marriage issue. We just got a letter this week from Bishop Thomas.
I think so.
And I hope that you guys were included in that mailing. If not, you might ask either your superintendent or send a notice to headquarters and ask for a copy of the letter. And he's kind of dealing with that issue. How do we address the cultural issues of our day? How are we loving? How do we respond? And where do we make alterations based on culture and society norms and that sort of thing, and where do we not? And that's kind of what Snyder's getting at. And I know, Glenn, you had some interesting thoughts along that line.
Well, I think that for me, when I hear the question, I'd like to, half of that question makes me want to give a caveat, but maybe you just need to talk about it in your forum. But when it says that we subject the culture, subject history to the biblical norm, I think that a good question is, in what way do we subject history to the cultural norm? Because that kind of language, taken inappropriately, I think, is suggesting that maybe we're trying to make our nation act in a biblical way.
Mm-hmm. Sort of like making them behave the way we believe Christians should, even though they're not Christians.
Thank you. He said that much more clearly than I was. I don't know where I was going, but that was what I was trying to say. And so I mean, Wesley certainly used Scripture as his norm for faith and life, and I think that we want to do that too. But in what way should we subject history, culture, sociology, politics to the norm of Scripture? Certainly for our own life.
Yes.
In looking at the events of the day and how we respond to them. Are there other ways? Wesley did, in fact, seek to transform faith or culture, rather, in history. Mm-hmm. But in what ways is it appropriate? What ways would maybe it's less appropriate?
Mm-hmm. Well, and actually that brings us to a good place to end this conversation. And that is that this whole class, I hope, has provoked us, and I get a sense from the thread of discussion that it has been doing that off and on, but that this whole class really catches the sense of Wesley, which is, it's not about talk, it's about doing. It's about putting these biblical and vitally important pieces from Scripture, from the past, from church councils, from our own reason and experience, and putting them into play in such a way that the world is attracted to the truth of the gospel. And ultimately, that's where Wesley was, where he took us, and hopefully that's where we ourselves are headed as well. So, thank you again for contributing in all of the ways you have. You guys have made some good suggestions about reading that I plan on following up on once summer hits. And again, your contributions have really, really been very thought-provoking for me. So thank you for the ways that you've helped me clarify some things for myself. So blessings on you, and thanks for being a part of this.